2.1, approval of the agenda. Could I have a mover, please? Trustee Intomasi, second by Trustee Rabenda. All in favor? Oh, yes. Okay. 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 So we'll just have a just an information item. So we'll just have a vote to amend the agenda, just with that piece of information. Yes, Trustee Intomasi. Oh, sorry. Okay. So all in favor to add that agenda item? Opposed? Seeing none, it passes. Great. So that will be 5.9. Okay. Thank you. Are there any conflicts of interest? Okay. Seeing none. 2.2 is the approval of the minutes. September 11th, 2018. Does anybody have any changes to the minutes or additions? Okay, could I have a mover for them, please? Trustee Michael, and seconded by Trustee Rowe. Great. All in favor? Opposed? Great, that passes. Now we're down to action items. 3.1, fraud management. So I'll ask Superintendent Ngoy to lead us with this, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The policy I-24, fraud management, is attached for review and consideration of the policy committee. References have been added for a trustee and employee code of conduct, and an updated reference for policy I-43, use of technology and digital citizenship, was also made. Overall, the policy process to investigate, address, and report fraud has not changed from the prior version. Thank you.
Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Intomasi, second by Trustee Rowe. Discussion? Questions, comments? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, so that passes. On to 3.2, Trustee Honoraria, Superintendent Ngoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In accordance with the Ontario Regulation 35706, the Board must adopt a trustee honoraria policy by October 15. On August 24, the Ministry had issued Memo B14, Update Education Funding for 2018-19, which communicated that the base amount for trustee honoraria had been changed back from the announced $6,300 in the GSN memorandum, the Grant for Student Needs memorandum back in March, back to $5,900 base, which has been in the prior year. Subsequently, the Ministry staff have informed the Council of Senior Business Officials that the amended regulation will be forthcoming by the end of September, beginning of October. To this date, we haven't really received the amended regulation. However, the policy has been changed in the spirit of what was communicated in the memorandum and by the Ministry staff, whereby the reference to the CPI index and the base amount was removed, and the base amount listed remains at $5,900. If there will be any changes to the regulation that are required for us to amend the policy, we'll be bringing it back to Policy Committee at a future meeting.
Thank you for that. Mover, please. Trustee Quinn, second by Trustee Rabenda. Discussion. It's mostly given to us by the government, so that's great. It's great. Okay, seeing no discussion on this, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? See none. That passes. Okay, 3.3, can I have a mover to put this on the table? English as a second language and English literacy development programs and services. Trustee Rowe, seconded by Trustee Rabenda. Would Superintendent Percassin like to speak to it?
Sure, just some very minor changes around language in the policy, nothing major that we went through, just kind of cleaning up the language around English language learners and no other specific additions other than references to the actual document that was used to develop the policy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome any questions.
Questions or Trustee Carabella?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So this was adopted in September 2015. So now it's been in effect for several years. What have you noticed? Has it been used? Many students are taking advantage of it? Or has it been in use?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with regard to the use of the program, our use of the program has not intensified or varied in any regard. We've always supported our ESL and ELL learners. This is just reflective of the policy that the ministry developed, and they were wanting school boards to follow up with policies and procedures with regard to ELLs in a very specific way. So the policy was developed in keeping with the new document. Other than that, we have a very vibrant program. Anywhere from 5 to 10% of our student population are ELLs, depending upon the immigration and newcomer levels. And it's a very vibrant program. Approximately 22 elementary educators and over 10 secondary educators across our system. So we're very pleased to be able to support them in this very special way.
Further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote on that. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, it's unanimous again. Great. We are now down to 3.4, prior learning assessment and recognition. Could I have a mover, please? Trustee Rabenda, seconded by Trustee Danko. Would Superintendent McGillicuddy like to speak to this, please?
Thank you, and through the chair, this policy 2-50 was last reviewed barely 2 years ago in May of 2016. There have been no changes to ministry documentation governing this process, but there have been some minor changes made so that the acronyms are consistently used throughout the document and that it's been updated to the new board's policy template. I don't think any questions at this time.
They're fairly minor. Any questions or to the changes? No. Seeing none, call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Oh, are you sorry? Okay, so opposed. Seeing none, that passes. Thank you. 708. Okay. So now we are on to 3.5 school fundraising activities. Yes?
Mr. Chair, I have a motion, please.
Okay. So we'll accept a motion and then we'll have discussion surrounding that issue, and we'll see what form it takes. Go ahead.
Okay. I move to accept with thanks the community feedback and move to make no changes to policy V04 school fundraising activities.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Trustee Rowe? Okay. So discussion. Trustee Danko.
I'd like to move an amendment to the motion.
What is the amendment?
The amendment, it will add the text and that the policy will be moved to the October next week's board meeting.
Generally, policy is only moved to the board if we actually make changes to it. So if we don't make any changes, if we make changes to it, it would go to the board meeting. And
well,
if it,
Mr. Chair, we've been discussing this policy for a year, and it deserves discussion at the board table, even if we're not making changes, because we have done many, many times 0 amendments to a policy, and they always get forward to the board meeting for ratification. That's been our best practice. That's been the habit of this board, and this would be a departure if we did not do that tonight with this policy. And we owe it to the people who have been following this issue very closely. I'm moving that we forward the unamended policy, whatever policy is passed, by this committee to next week's board meeting. I think that's fair.
Okay, you have a seconder for that? Trustee Quinn? Okay. Yeah, so just on the, let's just keep it with the amendment first, and then go ahead, Trustee Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm concerned that Trustee Intomasi's rush to accept with thanks and not discuss both sides of the parental and community engagement in the 300-odd pages that we've received in comments is throwing all the work away. And if we are just going to revert back to a policy without changing a single iota of language based on the hundreds of pages, I think that's a short-sighted view of the opinions of the parents who wish to see some changes to the language.
I think just one. Yeah, Trustee Quinn seconded it. Yes. So to your point, I think that there can still be a fulsome discussion on the survey activity within her motion itself, but it's up to individuals to raise whatever they want to discuss as we discuss the main motion. So like you could potentially bring up what you like or dislike about the feedback in the forum. Like it's not like we're cutting off debate on it. So go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, but if Trustee Intomasi's motion passes without the amendment, then everything else will be moot.
Oh, you mean you'd like to discuss at the board table itself?
Discuss it now. But if we accept Trustee Intomasi's preemptive motion here, then there'll be no reason to continue because there'll be no discussion of the feedback from parents and the consultation process.
Right, but what I'm suggesting is if you have something to say on that consultation, you could say it while we're on the main motion of it. So if there's certain things you like about it, it could happen in public right now.
I was intending to do that as part of the agenda, but a preemptive motion has been put on the table.
Okay. So on to the amendment itself. Any further discussion on that? Okay, so we'll call the vote on the amendment. The amendment would add the wording
that this policy be forwarded to the next board meeting, which is October 16th.
Okay.
For approval.
Okay. All in favor of that amendment? Okay. Opposed? Okay, so that fails. So now we're back onto the main motion. Yeah. Oh, sure. We can do it by probably it's better. So, Trustee Carabella.
I'm in favor.
You're in favor. Trustee Intomasi.
Opposed?
Trustee Michael.
Opposed.
Trustee Trice.
In favor.
Trustee Rabenda.
Opposed.
Trustee Danko.
Favor.
Trustee Rowe.
Opposed.
Trustee Quinn.
In favor.
Okay, so it's tied and it dies. So back onto the main motion. Arlene, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Just briefly. I think we've had more than enough conversation about it. I don't think by talking about it some more it's going to change much of anything. I think if we look at the stakeholder feedback as is, we're at roughly 74%. And to me, yes, there's maybe some details in there, but I think staff can look after those details and procedures. I don't think it needs to be into policy. And I think when you've got almost 75%, there isn't a lot of, this isn't a 51-49 that we've seen in other contentious issues. I think this is pretty loud and clear, and I think it's pretty comprehensive. And I think the system has told us pretty much by a very large majority that you never see that they just want it to stay the way it was, and that they felt the process was definitely flawed. Certainly there are some good suggestions in there, but I would leave that to procedure, not to policy.
Further comments, questions? Trustee Danko.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to bring the attention to you and to the other fellow board members about an article that I placed at each of your places that appeared in the Catholic Register on October 4th, written by Michael Swan. The article is regarding a plan by the Sick Children's Hospital to carry out euthanasia on children at the school, children even below the age of 12. So of course, that's made
Sorry,
possible by
Trustee
the...
Danko, just point of order, not at the school, but at the hospital. You misspoke.
Or did I? I'm sorry. I meant, of course, I meant at the hospital. For the hospital to carry out practice euthanasia on children in the hospital. Now, this is clearly something that it's very serious. I find it actually horrifying that a practice like this would be discussed at a hospital for sick children. But I'm just pointing this out because here you go, you have something that clearly violates what the church teaches regarding euthanasia. Even though the law may permit euthanasia due to the Health Care Consent Act that was passed back in 1996, that's caused other issues at this school board in the past, where euthanasia could be carried out on children without even parents being notified. This is a thing that should not concern only Catholics, but this should concern everyone because this is a very serious issue. And our church teaches that euthanasia is wrong, that assisted dying is wrong. Now, our job here isn't to bow to public pressure on these types of issues. I mean, if we're closing a school and there's public outcry, sure, you can keep a school open. But on matters of faith and morals, they're just not non-negotiable. The church would never give money to the hospital for sick children now if they did before. This is a very serious article, and I'm bringing it up because it's exactly the type of thing that the fundraising policy that the trustee Carabellata brought forward to try to prevent from happening. For example, if you had a child of yours, in the future you'll have children of your own, if that child was using illegal recreational drugs, would you continue to give your child money, cash? Of course you love that child, and the child does a lot of good things. Everyone does good. But would you continue to give money to someone who was doing something they should not be doing? That's how money can be used. If you're getting money for school or tuition, you can easily use the money that you saved by your parents giving you tuition money to use for drugs. Now, it is impossible to segregate the funds, is what I'm trying to say. Now, back in February, when we made this motion, a lot of the charities were concerned that other school boards were going to follow us. And they were clearly on the defensive with our motion being in the press. Now, if another school board had followed us, or at least enforced its existing policies, we would be in a much different position here today. The Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board already has our policy is very narrow. It only describes 3 things that we shouldn't commit to, that we shouldn't commit funds to. But the policy at the Dufferin Peel Catholic Board is all-encompassing. It encompasses more of Catholic teaching, more practices that we should not be funding. And it's in fact linked to what the Bishop or the Cardinal of Toronto, or the Archbishop of Toronto deems as being inappropriate charities. Whatever is deemed inappropriate by the Archbishop of Toronto as an inappropriate charity to donate to is something that the school board cannot give funds to. So I can't imagine that the Archdiocese of Toronto will contribute funds to Sick Kid Hospital under this new information. So I think that it's I think it's unfair to cut off debate of this policy at this point in time.
Trustee Quinn.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Director of Education. And in response to Trustee Intomasi's effort to leave the policy in place, how can the parents, the teachers, the donors, the entire community, the diocese, be certain that in leaving the decision-making up to the sole discretion of a principal, that the Catechism of the Catholic Church, that the foundations and moral principles of our religious faith, the reason that we have Catholic schools, are being upheld in the individual decisions made by, how many principals do we have? 39 elementary. So without a policy in place that dictates what the ethical foundations are of our faith and of our Catholic institution, how can we merely move it to procedure that hopefully and with the best intentions that the money will be raised that won't be antithetical to the teachings of the Catholic Church? How can we be assured that this policy, as it stands now and as Trustee Intomasi hopes to keep it, can live up to the demands of our faith?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question, Trustee Quinn. I think we would monitor it the same way we've monitored the current policy, the policy we've had for the last number of years. I think we ask principals to make those sorts of decisions in consultation with their school councils, with their staffs. Ultimately, we trust their judgment in terms of what might be antithetical, and if an issue, if there was a concern that we had to deal with at the board level or at the director's level, then it would come to me.
Follow up then. So the principals themselves, do they have the training in the catechism of the church and in the direction given to us by popes and encyclicals that are very instructive and clear, saying that we value human life from conception until natural death, and that taking action to support the things such as abortion and euthanasia that would financially support those evils do the principals have the tools and resources at hand to make those decisions on behalf of a Catholic institution?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think all of our principals value human life from conception to natural death. I'm confident in saying that. That's part of the vetting process or discernment process. We use their commitment to Catholic faith through the interview process. I would think if principals were unclear or unsure of a course of action to take, they would seek out additional information.
Trustee Danko and then Trustee Intomasi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I have to point out to the director, to others, that even though we do want to trust principals' judgment, that when this motion came out and was passed, several charities pulled out of participating with us based on the fact that they couldn't meet our standards, and they admitted that they were violators of what the church teaches. So we already know that not everyone is applying the same standard to which charities we're working with. That's very clear. This can be proven from news articles and what actually happened back in the spring. The other question I have is, has the director spoken to the director of the Dufferin-Peel Catholic School Board, which has a much stricter policy in place right now than we do, than our proposed one? It's actually more comprehensive and would generate a much shorter list of charities that they can work with. So has the director spoken to the director of Dufferin-Peel that has a very stricter policy, much stricter policy than we're proposing?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, I haven't.
Trustee Intomasi and then Trustee Carabella.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. To Trustee Quinn's comment about the principals, I'm having a hard time listening to that when I know the kind of rigorous development our principals go through to become a principal, and to look at our group of principals at this stage and say, oh yes, but are you Catholic enough? Like, are you kidding me? I'm sorry. It's just...
Point of order, Mr. Chair. No one asked the question if principals are Catholic enough.
I I apologize, but it is beyond my comprehension how we can sit here and question such a small group of people who are there every day looking after our children, who make sure that curriculum get delivered in the classroom, who oversee anywhere from, 35 to 70 to 100 staff a day, and it's all guided by our system's principles and by our mission and vision, by the fact that they're all Catholic and they've all gone through all kinds of program and they do it on a regular basis. So to say that one of them isn't going to make good judgment, I think as the director said, there's nothing wrong and there's nothing that stops them from speaking to their superintendents unless you want to question them too. I don't know. I mean, these are people that have grown up in our Catholic system, and from the time we can basically talk, we learn about natural life, natural death, and the majority of us, to our core, believe that. And so I find it hard to be questioning these people when they've made it to that status in life. And likewise, not just that policy, but any policy. And I don't see why, in practice, as we're writing procedures, this will be the procedure. Nothing will go to any institution unless this letter accompanies it. And any charity honors that. Our own bishop, I've spoken to Oxt about this. It has been spoken at a provincial level at length, and this is who we are. We value life. The sanctity of life is more than, and in all due respect to Trustee Danko, this is one opinion in a paper. I haven't read anything that supports this or what the meat and the foundation of this is. And so to me, this is no different than any article that somebody writes about anything. It's an opinion. But I'm sure there's more than just that opinion out there. So I will leave it at that. But I really think procedures can look after the majority of what needs to be looked after here. And I don't think we need to have it in policy. We will be here till the end of the earth if we're going to do it in policy, because we'll never agree on 5 words.
So Trustee Carabella, and then Trustee Danko, and then Trustee Michael.
So I think this policy, the Sanctity of Life motion, really shone a light on our charities and nonprofits that we are working with, and perhaps the light wasn't there before, so judgments were made without the full knowledge of what's going on. In terms of monitoring, I think that I haven't, in my 4 years, I haven't seen any sort of update about charities that we're dealing with, how much money they're making. This is something we're asking in part of this policy amendment to see those, to see that, and it had to be a motion that was approved that we received the first list of 100 charities. And even before I would start researching, or our staff would be researching, we were receiving letters, feedback saying some of these don't comply with church teaching. So that's valuable that we had that source of light show us what was going on. This is valuable. It's a good learning experience. And when you learn something, you then make new decisions going forward. And when you learn something is wrong and you want to do the right thing, it's always good to do the right thing. In terms of another comment about the public consultation being 74%, I appreciate all the work that went into the consultation, but we're not consulting on church teaching. And it's not a public vote on church teaching. Our Catholic faith is revealed by God. And he's very clear that a principal tenet is the sanctity, sacredness of life from conception to natural death. And it's wrong for anyone, but particularly a Catholic institution, to use funds to promote and fund the killing of preborn children through abortion. It's wrong to help raise money that will be earmarked for experimentation on unborn children in laboratories, resulting in their destruction. And it's wrong to turn a blind eye on the tenet of our Catholic faith and help financially support institutions that kill the elderly, vulnerable, and sick persons through euthanasia. And it's not this article that Trustee Danko brought in. You can't just dismiss it either. It's the Catholic Register. It's from a medical journal. It's what they're suggesting. And we should be thankful that we have this as like a clarion call, a bit of a warning right at this moment when we need that warning of what's to come. And not only that, we now know about it, and we still want to do it. When we know something is wrong, terribly wrong, and we want to continue doing it, that's not even sound pedagogy. No parent or teacher tells a child, okay, this part of what you're doing is really wrong, but go ahead and keep doing it. So as I said, it's always the right time to do the right thing. As a Catholic institution, we should stop funding charities and nonprofits not aligned with upholding the sanctity of life from conception to natural death.
Thank you. Trustee Danko.
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chair. I didn't give the article that I placed at your places is not an editorial. It's not an opinion piece. It's a news reporting article substantiated by fact. It's written by Michael Swan, who is not considered a conservative. He's actually considered fairly liberal and or whatever label you want to call him. But he's definitely this is a factual article that is being recalled from a presentation that was given at Sick Kids Hospital. This is not private information. It's not fake news. Okay, it's not fake news. It's real news. Anyways, the other thing I wanted to mention is that did my fellow board member across the way here did she hear me say that several charities pulled out because they themselves admitted that they cannot meet our standard? Now, is she saying that they know our own church's teachings better than we do? Because they themselves admitted that they don't meet our standard. So clearly, our existing policy was not vetted properly. It did not properly vet charities over the years. And this is something that we decided to address because we knew this was happening. It was very clear. So are you telling me that non-Catholic charities know the church's teachings better than we do? Because that's really something, that is really a bigger issue that is a problem. And if 75% of the respondents to the survey support donating to entities that promote abortion, that's also not a good sign. It's not a good sign.
Trustee Michael.
I'm finding it very repetitive. Like Trustee Danko said, it's been a year, and we finally did the right thing and put it out for consultation, as we do with all of our policies like this, and it came back 74%. I mean, you can't now start vetting these people or the principals, and it's quite possible that principals know as much as we do, or maybe even more, some of them. You can't just say that they can't possibly know as much as we do. I just don't understand. If we were doing something so inherently wrong, would it not stand to reason that someone might have given us a call or an email or stepped in and said, hey, this is inherently wrong, like maybe OCSTA, maybe our spiritual leader, the bishop, maybe, I don't know, I could go on all night, but we're going on again about this policy. And I think that we should have done consultation at the beginning, and we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it now, but we have to listen to it.
Okay. Any further? Yes, Trustee Quinn.
Just one more thing, through you to the chair of the policy committee. If we look at this current policy V04, or actually the previous policy V04, this really isn't a policy. This is a deference to procedure. There is nothing by way of policy here, and I'm I'm disappointed that the chair of the policy committee, who has been a very strong proponent of having strong policies and not leaving everything to procedure, is willing to let this policy stand as is without giving some definition to the language and the voice of the Board of Trustees in a policy, and is willing to defer the entire process of raising funds to the staff procedure, which can change at any time without notice to the trustees.
Any further comments? Trustee Danko.
Thank you again for recognizing me, Mr. Chair. You're very generous. The reason that the thing that triggered our review of this policy was the fact that this policy really doesn't mention any fidelity to church teachings. All of our other policies do. Every single one. There is a boilerplate statement of fidelity to Catholic teachings. It's maybe as vague or as vanilla as you would like to say that it is. But this particular policy doesn't even have that. So I would like to move an amendment to the policy that includes that same generic boilerplate commitment and fidelity to Catholic teaching, so that it's in our policy, so that there's some Catholic aspect to this policy. So I would like to move that. Now let me find a policy that has the generic language, because
I'll just interrupt you for a second.
The current policy doesn't have one. It does not have a reference to it.
You're asking for an amendment to the actual policy itself. Right now, we're deciding if we want to make amendments to it or not. So if this does not pass, and we throw the floor open again to a motion, and you can add whatever you'd like to it. But the current item on the agenda is...
So I'll bring it up later then. Okay, so I won't bring up the amendment right now. When would you like me to bring it up?
Well,
what I want to add to the text is simply a standard reference to church teaching that appears in all of our other policies. Nothing different or unusual, but an amendment that does that. Because that is really the minimum standard. This policy is actually below our minimum standards as it is right now. And that's plain. It's a friendly amendment.
Well, it's not. It's completely against the whole purpose of the motion. The purpose of the motion is we are not going to make any amendments to this, that's what
Mr. Chair, if I may. This policy was defective from the outset. It was deficient in the sense that it made no reference to what the church teaches on life issues. That's what triggered the examination of this policy. That it's held to a lower standard than all of our other policies. Even our policy about school lunches refers to fidelity to Catholic teachings. Now, I'm exaggerating, but every single policy that we have, however mundane or secular the issue, refers commitment and fidelity to church teachings. This is the only one that does not mention any of it.
So what we'll do is we'll vote on. No, you know what? This is out of order just because you want to change the policy itself. We're right now debating the motion here, which is Trustee Tomasi's motion on making no changes. So you can put a motion forward with that amendment if this policy committee decides that is not the right way to go and that changes should be made. So if the policy committee decides to vote down her motion, then you can make amendments.
Then we'll be back at square one, where this important policy, and all of our other policies, as I say, as mundane as they may be, refer to commitment to Catholic teaching, and this one does not. We will be in a deficient position.
No, I hear you, Trustee Danko, and the great thing about the policy committee is policies come up every 6 months or 1 year or regularly to be reviewed. So we've certainly talked about this important issue for a long period of time, but it does not stop anyone from bringing up this issue in 6 months or 1 year. But if the group decides they would not like to continue with this discussion, I have to follow the vote of the group. So,
Can you read the motion?
Trustee Tomasi, if you could read it out one more time, please.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I move to accept with thanks the community feedback, and I move to make no changes to policy V-04, school fundraising activities.
Okay. So we'll call the vote. Okay, so we'll go, I'll tell you what. Since we did this for 6 months, because it's an important issue and people care about it, we'll go around the table. Everyone can get 2 minutes for a final discussion. So I think we have discussed this issue. But would you like to begin, or would you like to begin?
I would just like to say, yes, I'd like to begin. I can't believe that as a responsible trustee you would make no changes to that with all the information we have and the point that Trustee Danko made right now. I think that, we have to be strong and really stand up for our faith when it's not popular, but when it's the right thing to do. It's a serious issue. We're not talking about tea and coffee. We're not talking about, choosing black pants or red pants. We're talking about life and death, and we can be an example to other schools. First of all, to our own children at the school, teach them why we're not fundraising for this particular organization and choosing another, whereas there's a vast amount. This whole thing could be taken so positively, a great teaching moment to champion our faith, to be different, not flow with the current, stand against the current, and be strong and be a light and a beacon. And I think kids would really come up with some great ideas for a lot of local fundraising or we can certainly do the same things, help the same amount of people, but without compromising and throwing in evil with that. Another thing, honestly, there have been more children killed through abortion and in laboratories in the past 40 years than any time in the history of the world. You go to numberofabortions.com. We're at 1.5 billion since 1980. I don't think we should be a part of any of that. 1.5 billion, it's staggering. Where are the children in our school? We're always wondering about declining enrollment. Every year in Halton, there's 1,400 abortions in Halton. That's a high school full of children. We have to be an example somewhere, and I would say that we start now to do the right thing.
Thank you for your comments. Trustee Tomasi, do you have any final thing to say?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the only thing I would want to say is that we're a Catholic system, and we have all Catholic teachers, we have Catholic superintendents, we have Catholic everybody. And we're not saying to any charity that isn't Catholic, here's the money, go do what you want with it. We generally, to my knowledge, in every school community, they raise funds specifically for certain things, and generally it is for someone's mother, brother, sister, family member, friend, classmate, that sort of thing. And I think they are very conscientious about where that money goes. And I mean, if you do look at the policy, perhaps it's not as clear as some of the other ones with, Catholic faith or Catholic this or Catholic that, but we are Halton Catholic. We're not Halton Public. We're Halton Catholic. And those values are there day in, day out, in our curriculum, in our focus on faith, and the students are taught about this. It's not as if we're a secular world living in a bubble. We live in a secular world, but we have Catholic values, and I really think from kindergarten right through. They discern that every day. I see some of the schoolwork that gets hung. I see what children say. I see their comments. I watch Twitter every day. And I can only tell you, I am blown away by the Catholic component compared to my generation. So when I look at this, I can only say, leave it to the people to decide where it needs to go within the context of our faith, and I think the faith is taught quite sufficiently.
Trustee Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To reiterate, we've been doing this for a year. We didn't do it correctly. We didn't put it out for consultation. We let people speak, as many people as wanted to, as many times as wanted to. We heard their voices. We let them vote. We got the results. We were elected to do just that, to follow the ratepayers and do the right thing. And I believe we're not here to reinvent the whole motion again. Thank you.
Trustee Trites?
I think if we let this policy stand as it is through Trustee Intomasi's motion, I think this board has taken a path on what we were elected to do, which is to govern and to have a policy that's full and that's proper for all the reasons that have been stated. We've taken a path, and that is shameful.
Trustee Rabenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has gone on for a year. We did the survey, albeit later than we should have done, and for that we apologize. But the people have spoken. We are here to represent the parents and our stakeholders, and 74% of them have spoken with regard to preferring the previous type of policy that we had, and that is a very strong majority in anyone's book. I notice that whenever we have this conversation, the concept of abortion always comes up, and I don't believe anyone in this room, I don't know of anyone even, who would believe in abortion. But I find that tends to elicit great emotion, and it should do. But I notice we always come back to using that. We don't talk about anything else except abortion, and I find that very upsetting. So 74% of the people have told us that they do not agree with the way we were going. Those are our ratepayers. They're the parents of the children, and I think it's totally presumptuous of us to think that we know better. Thank you.
Trustee Danko?
Mr. Chair, you've been more than generous to me. I've said everything I need to say.
Thank you. Trustee Rowe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that up to now our schools have done a good job of making sure that they've selected good charities from their fundraising, and I believe the principals, in consultation with the parent community, will continue to make excellent choices in how fundraising funds are distributed.
Trustee Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'll first correct some what I believe to be misstatements from fellow trustees. 74% of our stakeholders did not respond to this comment. I believe there was 900 and something comments, and 74%
of the package.
I have the microphone right now, and 74% of our constituents did not participate in this. We had a vocal minority, I believe, of people who do not share the tenets of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and we're vocal in that. When the head of the OECTA Halton unit laughs when Trustee Carabella mentions 1,400 abortions in Halton, and he giggles joyfully. I wonder about that. I wonder about the laughing at the statement of the number of abortions in the province.
Trustees should know we haven't had the declining abortion for 10 years. That's a base that you guys should be working real deep.
So the negative voice, the opposing voice to the current motion was strong, and 74% was only a small segment of a vocal minority of our board, I believe. And I believe that those who did support the changes to the motion, yourself included at one time, were doing the right thing. And as Trustee Michael thinks she's doing the right thing, I believe that we did the right thing.
Thank you. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll move on to the vote. So this is on Trustee Intomasi's motion. Could you just read it out one more time, please?
I move to accept with thanks the community feedback and move to make no changes to policy V-04, school fundraising activities.
Trustee Carabella?
I'm opposed.
Okay. Trustee Intomasi?
In favor.
Trustee Michael?
In favor.
Trustee Trites?
Opposed.
Trustee Rabenda?
In favor?
Trustee Danko?
Opposed?
Trustee Rowe?
In favor?
Trustee Quinn?
Opposed.
Okay, and I'm in favor, and it passes 5-4. We'll move on. Yes,
Point of order.
Trustee Quinn.
So, I don't understand how a policy can come to the council or the Board of Trustees, be debated for a year, and not come to the full meeting of the Board of Trustees for final approval. The date's going to change on this. It was reviewed and it was discussed. It was changed once. It was changed again. Why does it not come? Explain to me why in our procedure it doesn't come back for a final vote in the main.
Yeah.
The main meeting.
So in order for any policy to go to the board itself, the policy committee needs to decide, which is a meeting of the whole, needs to decide to send it actually to the board itself. So if this group decided not to forward it on, and you're correct that we do in almost every case, even for minor items, then it doesn't get passed on to the board meeting itself.
Can you recount any instance where a policy has been discussed, changed, staff have reported that there's no needs for change, and it doesn't go to the main meeting?
There have been where it's the only ones where we constantly bring them back tend to be health and safety, where they're required by legislation to be changed on an ongoing basis. So the board is required by law to send them back to the board and have them changed. If there is no political will within the board to make a change to like a significant number of policies we have, then it doesn't. Yeah, not all policies get passed to the board on a regular basis. Only the ones that are required by law or there's a political motivation. Trustee Danko.
Mr. Chair, you know that that's not true. You know, we have passed every single policy with zero changes other than the date. We've ratified things that have not changed one single letter of a policy. We've sent it on in a routine fashion to the full board meeting every single time we've ever had a policy discussion at this table. There are practically no exceptions. And you know that. But you've been policy chair for 5 years, and I was for 1 year. And we all know that that's the case.
But Trustee Danko, you'd agree there's no set timeline for each of these policies. In fact, this board sitting here today actually reviewed this policy back in 2016 and decided to pass it to the board because we made the decision. The political will of the board said at that time, yes, we were going to pass this and just either rubber stamp it or not. The group today has decided they do not want to do it. So it's not like we haven't done it in the past. And there is no set schedule which says we have to do it every 3 months. You know that's a fact.
So you're telling me that you do not even want the board to ratify the consultation at the board meeting. You're telling me that you don't even want to see the board accept the community consultation at a full board meeting. Is that what you're saying?
I can tell you this committee certainly doesn't. They just passed a motion to say they
You cast the deciding vote, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well, and I'm happy with that. Okay. So now we're moving on to a discussion item on cannabis legislation. So this is 4.1. It was asked to be added to the agenda for it. And I think obviously, just if I can make a quick opening remark, and maybe Trustee Quinn, if you want to ask some specific questions on it. I think the idea was if this is coming down the line, quickly, and is going to be legalized, do we want to take a second look at some of these policies? I know we have fairly recently, but I think you had some specific questions that you wanted to ask of the director. Trustee Quinn.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. With some of the turnover in staff on the superintendent and director's level, I wanted to refocus the board on the changes to the provincial cannabis legislation and to what our policies might reflect, should there be any willingness of the trustees to actually change policies again, that we would update the policy to reflect the proliferation of cannabis that is going to happen imminently in our province and in our cities and in our schools. We know that cannabis is detrimental to the growing brains of adolescents and youth, and that the likely easy distribution of marijuana will lead to increased use by our students, and they will not be committing a crime by possessing or using marijuana. They will be merely committing an infraction of and be subject to a fine if at all. So I think to the superintendent, what are the plans for staff to regulate and curtail the presence of marijuana in our schools, the consumption of marijuana by our students, and how does our role as a board of trustees mesh with the legalization and decriminalization of cannabis?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have started our review of our policy, so we already created our cycle for this year. One of the first policies, we pulled 3 policies that we found direct connection. The first one is the smoking ban, so we are reviewing that policy in December and looking at it with that critical lens of the new recreational cannabis legislation. The other policy was already reviewed, actually March of 2018, and it's policy II-28, alcohol, tobacco, drug education, and abuse in our schools. So we've already been through that review of that policy this year. In light of the information that we hope to receive more information, we'll go back to that policy review which took place in March and make sure it's encompassing of those pieces that you speak about and making sure that kids don't have access. It is still illegal for people under the age of 19 to be in possession. So, the majority of the kids in our schools are younger than 19. The third policy that is aligned with that is the Progressive Discipline and Safety in Schools Policy and Procedure. Originally, they were scheduled in the cycle that I shared at our first meeting for April. We pulled that up to January because we see that as an imminent topic, especially as the legislation comes into fruition. So from that perspective, we're already looking at what the policies are that we already have in existence that have some language and reference to marijuana. And in that process, I think we need to determine if we need an additional policy as we do the critical review of the 3 policies. And if we do, then we would go through that process. I know that in the spring, information was shared at our Council of Chairs meeting as well as with administrators. And again, as we receive new information, that information will be shared accordingly with all stakeholders.
Director, do you have a comment or? No, okay. Sorry, your hand was.
Thank you for that.
Trustee
and I'm glad that it's in the planning cycle and will be coming back up. But what changes can we expect to see in our schools as of the date of legalization, with staff, with the possession of, with the smell and the pungent odor of marijuana? I'm predicting an entirely different environment in our province, and I'm wondering how we can ensure that schools are still a place that encourages abstinence from marijuana until according to the best medical evidence, and that we really do follow through on our policies to ensure that we don't let the public attitude change the policies in our school. So what's going to change as of the end of the month?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know that there's a direct communication by the end of the month. We have had some discussion at our senior table about that. I can tell you that the legislation, as I said, it is illegal for children or people under the age of 19. It's only permitted in private residence. Those are the key pieces that keep coming from the ministry. Individuals would not be allowed to use recreational cannabis in any public place, workplace, or motorized vehicles. So we would continue to monitor, and we would have to use our progressive discipline policy as we have in the past if that's been a situation at the school. I know that, it may be more accessible, and I think that's what you are alluding to, but I don't think our position would change. We would continue to address the issues at schools as we have in the past.
Thank you very much again. So the latest understanding of the legislation I see is that it is going to be not restricted to personal residences and will be consumed in any public space where you can actually smoke a cigarette. So that's what I understand the most recent legislation to contain. So that poses another issue.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say it's illegal for possession under 19, does that mean we'll be calling the authorities if you find a student in possession of an illegal substance, or will you take discipline into your own hands? Will you be confiscating marijuana? Will the school be taking that away from students? This is a big deal, and I think we should be ready by the date of it that it happens.
Through you, Mr. Chair. While we're hopeful we don't have a rash of students bringing cannabis to school, coming under the influence, I'm not sure I'm letting anything out of the bag by saying that doesn't already happen. When that does, school administration follows our policies with regards to safe schools. It's fairly clearly outlined. Cannabis, although decriminalized for students over the age of 19, like alcohol, would still be considered off bounds on school property. Students being under the influence of either cannabis or alcohol would also be subject to school discipline.
About vaping and the I guess it's almost an epidemic amongst our schools. I've heard from the parent council and the principal at Holy Trinity who said that she could open up her own vape store with the amount of vape pens and paraphernalia she has confiscated from students. So again, can you tell me what we're doing to improve the disincentive to students to vape and to educate them? It seems that we were so successful in smoking that the vape is the alternative and really has become an issue in our schools.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think there's no doubt that there's more work that needs to be done to bring awareness to both students and parents about the potential health implications of students vaping. As you did point out, the number of students who traditionally smoke province-wide has gone down pretty consistently. I think parents understand that they hope their kids don't smoke, or if they start smoking, they stop. There seems to be a different perception around vaping. Kind of the public perception is that it's not harmful. I think as recently as last week, there's more information coming out about that. So I think certainly around the health and phys ed curriculum, vaping is the new cigarette, I guess. So certainly around the education piece, there's still some work to do on that. In terms of what happens at the school level, again, I think we treat vaping as smoking in terms of a consequence perspective, but that's only part of it, right? The consequence as opposed to trying to educate students and parents that it's something that's not desirable for lots of reasons.
Trustee Quinn.
Just one more thing. Would there be any value in an increased budget towards that education? Because I think it really is an issue for the parents and for the schools themselves. You must have heard it much more than I have. Would there be value in programming speakers or enhanced Bravo for high school kids so that they could get the medical information that is lacking and get the the truth about the potential side effects of nicotine, first of all, and of vaping as well.
We were hopeful. I'd say yes to all of those suggestions. We were hopeful that we were going to get some funding from the ministry. That was the information that we had in the spring. A little bit more specific to cannabis, but that could be used for some PD. We're still waiting to see if that funding is going to actually come through.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to information items. I think many of these have to do directly with the action items, fraud management certainly. 5.2 is election audit compliance committee. I don't know if you have any comment to make on that, or it's just there for our information. Director Daly?
I don't have comment to make on it, no.
5.3, same thing, all the way down to school security. So at 5.8, you just have upcoming policy agenda items for November 13th. That's the last policy committee meeting. And then 5.9 is Trustee Danko's information item. And just a reminder about Thursday's meeting. And I don't think we have any correspondence, nothing to go in camera about, no new business. Everyone's here, so could I have a motion to adjourn, please? Trustee Rabenda, seconded by Trustee Rowe. All in favor? Okay, opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Could I have a closing prayer from Trustee Intomasi, please?
Join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.